Your lying blue eyes used to charm me and hypnotize me through and through.
On Thursday, July 30th, 2020, Jennifer Jones Butski of Virgil, Ontario, attended at Fearman's Pork Inc. slaughterhouse in Burlington, Ontario, in opposition of a peaceful vigil respecting pigs on their way to slaughter and honoring fallen activist Regan Russell. What could possibly be going on in the mind and heart of an individual so fervently opposed to compassion, justice, and peace is beyond me. But Jennifer Jones Butski took the depravity to a whole other level when she turned up that day alongside Megan Sentinel of Sentinel Carriage Company in Niagara-on-the-Lake, donning one sign of a two-sign message stating, quote, "Epstein didn't kill himself, but Regan Russell committed suicide." After weeks of doubling down on this false narrative that Regan's untimely death was in fact a suicide, Jennifer Jones Butski released on August 20th, 2020, this apology. Now, I'd like to go over the details of this apology and my response to it with you, but before I do, there are two things you should know about Jennifer Jones Butski. The first is that she is the founder, and as far as I can tell, alongside her equally hateful mother, Karen Taylor Jones, one of the only two remaining members of a group called Locals for Carriages in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario. And this group's purpose is and has only ever been, as far as we can tell, to antagonize, intimidate, harass, and dox activists who are standing up against horse exploitation in Niagara-on-the-Lake in the form of horse-drawn carriages. The second thing you need to know about Jennifer Jones Butski is that I would bet money, good, hard-earned money, that she is the most dishonest person who has ever walked the face of this earth. Truth just falls on deaf ears when it comes to Jennifer Jones Butski. She spends most of her life online spreading hateful, treacherous gossip and libelous statements about activists, ranging from the relatively benign nonsense that we're paid for our activism to horrific, disgusting lies that we, for example, are rapists and pedophiles. Nothing Jennifer Jones says is true. If you have had a conversation with Jennifer Jones Butski, particularly if you have read anything she has written online, chances are what you have heard or read is the antithesis of truth. And this makes it especially interesting to me that Jennifer Jones Butski would go out of her way to post this apology, as she calls it, clearing the air and getting the facts straight about her disgusting behavior at Fearman's Pork Inc. on July 30th, 2020. It seems like suddenly, when it could serve her, or she feels that it could make her look a little less disgusting than her behavior actually was, the truth suddenly matters to her. So she's gone out of her way to post this apology, to dissociate from this conduct. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. So let's take a look at her apology and let's review reactions to it. The first thing that I want to say, and perhaps the most important about Jennifer Jones Butski's apology in respect of her sign regarding Regan Russell, is that this is not an apology. This is very obviously an exercise in self-protection, self-preservation, and insulating herself from the consequences of her actions. She works hard to dissociate from this messaging throughout her entire post. And there are two issues with that are interesting to me. The first is that Jennifer Jones Butski has been boasting for weeks since she was caught engaged in this disgusting behavior. Jennifer Jones Butski has been boasting the fact that she did not physically hold the sign that actually read Regan Russell committed suicide. She is so proud of the fact that all her sign said was that Epstein didn't kill himself. Now, if you know anything about the Epstein case, you'll know that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender. He was a child rapist and a sex trafficker of young girls. So the fact that Jennifer Jones Butski is so intent on making it known that she only bore the sign that supports and implies some compassion or understanding for or victimization of a sex offender says a lot about her character. The second problem with Jennifer Jones Butski's apology, and the reason it's not an apology at all, is that while she's working so hard to dissociate from this conduct, we know full well that this messaging was her idea. She is behind these signs. First of all, these signs were obviously intended to read together. If you look closely, when you see photos of herself and Megan Sentinel standing next to each other holding these two signs, you'll notice Jennifer Jones Butski's sign reading Epstein didn't kill himself ends in an ellipses. An ellipses meaning to be continued. There's more to this sentence. There's more to this thought. The ending of that thought, the conclusion of that thought, or the upshot, is Megan Sentinel's sign that Regan Russell committed suicide. So no matter who was personally holding the sign that read Regan Russell committed suicide, it is clear that this false narrative that Regan's untimely and tragic death was somehow her fault, or that she deserved it, or that she asked for it, is a narrative created and disseminated by Jennifer Jones Butski. And this is despicable, and her reaction to this is despicable, and even her false apology is despicable for several reasons. Not the least of which is that this lie disrespects the life and death of an amazing, wonderful woman who spent her life in service of others. Regan Russell was an activist for over 40 years, standing up for human and non-human vulnerable individuals, the most vulnerable individuals in our society. And she asked for nothing in return. She spent her life helping individuals who probably could never help her back, in ways for which she would never gain personally. And that is the best of humanity. And Jennifer Jones Butski sees fit to mock her death and disrespect her life in this way. The second reason, or a second reason, there are many, for which this sign is so problematic, is that it mocks suicide. In Jennifer Jones Butski's home country of Canada, the most recent Stats Canada information indicates, which was in 2017, indicates that in that year, 2017, over 4,100 individuals committed suicide. That means 4,100 individuals plus were the victims of this tragedy. And not only these individuals who were the immediate victims, but countless friends and family and loved ones of these individuals are affected by suicide every day, every year in Jennifer's home. And she sees fit and believes it is appropriate to mock that, to make light of that, and to use something so tragic to antagonize those who have been left behind by our dearly departed Regan Russell. That is sick. That is sick on a level that I can't begin to comprehend. Another reason why Jennifer's reaction to this is so telling about who she is the fact that she believes that her apology dissociating her from actually holding the sign, actually being the one who held the sign that donned her message that Regan Russell committed suicide, makes her exempt from or insulates her from the consequences of these disgusting actions. And who has she named to bear those consequences? The consequences of her ideas, her behavior, her false narrative. Her friend, Megan Sentinel. She has been willing to throw her friend under the bus so that she can dissociate herself from a sign that was her own doing. That was clearly her own doing. That's obviously up for debate. Maybe you believe that, maybe you don't, but the evidence is compelling. And knowing Jennifer Jones Butski as I do, and as all of the activists in Niagara-on-the-Lake do, this was her messaging. She brought Megan Sentinel into it. She convinced Megan Sentinel likely to hold the more offensive sign so that she could dissociate from the consequences of that. So, Megan Sentinel, if you're watching this, know that your friend, Jennifer Jones Butski, has manipulated you, has used you, and has thrown you under the bus. Jennifer Jones Butski has this almost pathological tendency to use and manipulate people into doing her dirty work. She has these hateful, violent ideologies, but doesn't want to get her hands dirty, so reins in individuals or attracts individuals who are willing to escalate her hateful rhetoric into violence and into deplorable behavior. So this apology in which she dissociates herself is meaningless, and the efforts that she makes in this apology are striking. At one point, she says that this lie, this falsity that Regan Russell committed suicide is not something that Locals for Carriages endorses, and that this was, I think she's trying to imply that this was the behavior of maybe one rogue member who sort of did this without anybody knowing or maybe supporting the fact that she was doing it. And her apology makes very clear, or attempts to make very clear, that this is not a rhetoric endorsed by Locals for Carriages. But how can she say that? She is Locals for Carriages, and this is her messaging. She and her mother, Karen Taylor Jones, are all that's left, for all intents and purposes, of Locals for Carriages, and she is the founder. And she creates this messaging and holds up this sign in conjunction with Megan Sentinel. And somehow this doesn't represent Locals for Carriages. She's making deliberate efforts to throw her colleagues and her supporters under the bus so that she can escape the consequences of her actions. But beyond that, it's interesting to me because the common thread in a lot of Jennifer Jones Butski's rhetoric is that protesters need to be removed from Niagara-on-the-Lake. She is committed to the fact that we should not be exercising our constitutional rights under Section 2B and Section 2C of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to protest, to disseminate information in peaceful assembly. She is constantly adding fuel to the fire of hate for protesters. She's constantly gathering up and summoning individuals who want to do us harm and talking about things like driving by and shooting us in order to get rid of us, and how the Niagara Regional Police are not doing their job because we're still protesting and their job should be to oppress those rights. And how the town council is not doing their job because despite as many times as they've tried to stop us and they've tried to oppress and suppress our constitutional right to protest, the Niagara Regional Police have told them time and time again, you can't do it. They're charter protected. So, for Jennifer Jones Butski to say, on one hand, that protesters have no right to be protesting in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and that they deserve to be subject to unimaginable forms of violence and ridicule because they're there, and that the police and the town council are not doing their job because they haven't violated our constitutional rights to protest yet, despite the town council's best efforts in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And then on the other hand, say, I'm just here because I have the right. I can be, so why not? It's unbelievable to me. It doesn't add up. It's so interesting that she believes that truth is only important when it can save her hide, and that the Constitution is only important when she can use it, how she wishes to use it, and when it can benefit her. So in addition to her pathological tendency for lying and manipulating and conning people and using people, she also has a very serious problem with hypocrisy. One of her favorite things to say, and one of many people's favorite things, I will say that it's not just Jennifer Jones Butski in this case, but people love to try to find reasons why vegans and animal activists are being hypocrites. And they love to think that anything we do is misaligned with our values, and that somehow makes us a hypocrite. But I don't see any hypocrisy here from anyone except for Jennifer Jones Butski and her minions. In her apology, Jennifer Jones Butski also states that she would like nothing more than to find common ground with the animal activists in Niagara-on-the-Lake, whom she specifically refers to as At War for Animals Niagara, or AWFAN, AWFAN. And she says that she will work tirelessly and continue to work tirelessly to achieve this common ground. And this is completely misleading for a couple of reasons. First, AWFAN is not involved in these protests. We being protesters, a group of independent, concerned citizens who come together individually and of their own individual autonomy and power to protest the horse slave industry in Niagara-on-the-Lake, with which we disagree. We have told Jennifer Jones Butski several times, as she continues to spew this narrative that AWFAN is behind these protests, that AWFAN is a media outlet. The only reason they attend is because their role, what they have taken on as their form of activism, is to bring attention to and to position in the media animal-related actions that are taking place throughout the Niagara region. So AWFAN attend to film our protests, but they are not our protesters. We attend as individual citizens who are concerned on our own autonomy about these issues. We have said this to Jennifer Jones Butski countless times, and she refuses to accept it. And this is another great example of how truth falls on her deaf ears. She is exempt from understanding the truth. I don't know whether she can't understand that, can't conceptualize it, doesn't want to hear it, or hears it and chooses to continue to spew lies and spew the rhetoric that we are some kind of club or group or organization who are active in this community together. But she cannot let that go. And I think that says a couple of things. The first is, as I mentioned, it says a lot about her commitment to and value for truth. It also creates question about her authenticity in saying that she intends to find common ground with activists, because everywhere that we see Jennifer Jones Butski continuing to spew these lies that we are banded together under AWFAN or under some kind of group, every time we see her say that, it's very explicitly so that the public, who she is trying to rev up and to mobilize against us, have a very clear target for their violence, for their harassment, for their assault, and just for their hate. And so if your true intention is to find common ground with activists. Why are you categorizing us or lumping us together in a group of which we are not members, so that you have a more synthesized or consolidated target for some of the worst behavior imaginable? If you truly had a vested interest in finding common ground with us, you would accept our truth and you would come to the table with that in mind. You wouldn't need an easy target. You would speak to us as individuals because we are individuals, and you wouldn't need a consolidated place to target in order to spew all of that hatred. The second thing that sticks out for me about this stated intention to find common ground with activists and to work tirelessly to do so is the fact that the only thing Jennifer Jones Butski and Locals for Carriages have worked tirelessly to do since LFC's insemination in 2017 is stalk, harass, dox, threaten, and intimidate activists, and to garnish support from violent individuals who are willing to escalate Jennifer Jones Butski's personal hatefulness into potentially life-threatening or welfare or safety-threatening forms of violence toward activists. In fact, just last year, it is my understanding that an agreement was reached between the protesters and the carriage companies and carriage supporters to express ourselves in more amicable ways, or to at least refrain from the sorts of behavior in which Jennifer Jones Butski engages and encourages her followers and supporters to engage. And the carriage supporters breached that agreement. The agreement was written up, I believe, by the Niagara Regional Police, and it was formal and on paper and intended to keep the peace. And activists were abiding by that agreement to the letter, and Jennifer Jones Butski and her minions violated that agreement. So I don't see this as working tirelessly to find common ground or to make peace. In fact, it makes very clear that that phrasing in Jennifer Jones Butski's so-called apology is intended to garnish sympathy or compassion, or to make herself look like some kind of hero, where in fact she is the problem in Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's not protesters. It's not even so much the town or anyone else who has tried to oppress us. It is Jennifer Jones Butski. She is the problem in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And before I finish up here, there's one last thing I'd like to point out about the incident that took place at Fearman's Pork in Burlington on July 30th. Megan Sentinel is the daughter of Laura and Fred Sentinel, who also are parents to Sean Sentinel, and as a family, they own Sentinel Carriage Company in Niagara-on-the-Lake. They are the big horse exploiters in that town. Of the family, Laura Sentinel, Sean Sentinel, and Megan Sentinel attended that day to antagonize activists and to disrespect Regan Russell. Megan Sentinel herself donned the sign that everyone is outraged about, the sign reading, "Regan Russell committed suicide." And yet, we have received no apology from Sentinel Carriages, from Laura or Fred Sentinel, or from Sean or Megan Sentinel. Why is Jennifer Jones Butski posting all over social media this false apology that is a clear effort to make herself out to be equal parts victim and innocent and hero, as if she's sorry for what happened? And we've heard nothing from the person who she is displacing blame onto for this sign. So if you truly acknowledge that this rhetoric is toxic and hateful and disgusting, and that no human should be engaging in this kind of behavior, then where is the apology from the person you're blaming for it? And of course, I can't hold Jennifer Jones Butski accountable for the fact that the Sentinel Carriage company has not apologized. But I think it's worth noting that they haven't. It's also noteworthy that Jennifer Jones Butski released this apology on the evening of August 20th, 2020, when that very morning, in the morning and afternoon of August 20th, 2020, Jennifer Jones Butski, Sean Sentinel, and Karen Taylor-Jones showed up again at Fearman's Pork Inc. in Burlington to further antagonize activists and disrespect their action, which is only ever intended to provide compassion to condemned pigs who are about to die and to honor their friend Regan Russell. They attended in the morning and stayed through the afternoon, making every effort to intimidate and harass activists, filming us, getting directly in our faces, and then mere hours later, Jennifer Jones Butski releases an apology that she is so sorry that she did this on July 30th, but not sorry enough not to have done it again on August 20th, the same day she apologized for it. So, Sentinel Carriage Company, I'll give you a freebie here. You don't need to think of this yourself. You don't need to rely on your own internal sense of right or wrong to do this. I'll tell you, you owe us an apology. Laura Sentinel, Sean Sentinel, Megan Sentinel, you are all incriminated. You owe us an apology. Jennifer Jones Butski, we do not accept your apology. And one of the reasons we do not accept that is because we have planned to gather together in peaceful protest on August 23rd, 2020 in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And this protest is actually less of a protest. This event is specifically designed to honor Regan Russell, and in specific opposition to this rhetoric that her death was her fault or that she deserved it. This is a vigil, a rally, a memorial for a beautiful woman who was tragically killed, and Jennifer Jones Butski has assembled a team of violent and aggressive farmers and truckers and other members of the animal agriculture industry who she has supported at Fearman's Pork in Burlington to come to Niagara-on-the-Lake to that event and disrupt that peaceful memorial for Regan Russell. If you were truly sorry, you would not be engaging in behavior that amounts to effectively crashing someone's memorial, akin to crashing any other form of memorialization, whether it's a funeral or a vigil. Who does that? And how can you say that you're sorry on August 20th for having been so disgusting when on August 23rd you intend to scale up your disgustingness? You intend to engage in behavior that is even more reprehensible than that for which you have been rightfully shamed and ridiculed, in which you engaged on July 30th. So if you're truly sorry, there are two things you need to do. You need to call off your goons for August 23rd and let us remember and respect our friend in peace and in compassion and love. The second thing you need to do is to disband Locals for Carriages. That organization has been nothing but a cesspool of violence and hatefulness since the day you created it. And that, for all intents and purposes, as far as anyone can tell, that violence and hatefulness has only ever been its purpose and intention. You have done nothing else. You have done nothing constructive. You have been an impediment to resolution in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And if you truly apologize for your depraved and revolting behavior, and if you truly wish for a peaceful resolution formed on the basis of solid ground, you need to get out of our way. Let us communicate with the town directly. Let us communicate with the carriage companies directly, and stop fanning the flames of violence and hate toward activists. Stop putting our safety at risk. Stop putting our well-being at risk. Stop putting our lives at risk. Stop garnishing support for doing so, and using individuals who are just violent enough to escalate your personal hatefulness into physical violence and into stalking and harassment and following activists home and blocking in their cars so they can't leave until you say so. Get out of our way. Allow us to come to a peaceful resolution with those who have any authority whatsoever or any stake whatsoever in this matter. We hope that you'll seriously consider doing this. We hope that you'll allow us to make progress toward this issue, because all you and your mother, Karen Taylor Jones, have been is an impediment to justice, an impediment to truth, and an impediment to progress. How embarrassing for Niagara-on-the-Lake to be one of the last holdouts of this antiquated horse exploitation industry when progressive cities all around the world are banning this slave trade. It's time to ban horse carriage rides in Niagara-on-the-Lake. It's time for Jennifer Jones Butski to extricate herself from this situation and to allow us to come to terms that are agreeable with those who have a legitimate interest in this argument and who are not just busybody locals with nothing better to do who enjoy harassing peaceful protesters.
Like a fool, Lord, I've been dreaming your lying blue eyes and just told on you. All those stories I've been hearing, I wouldn't believe that they were true. But just this morning, over coffee, your lying blue eyes just told on you. Your lying blue eyes used to charm me, hypnotize